It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andi Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. My name is Brian Wilson, and unfortunately, Andi Grabner cannot join me as my co-host today because he is off at DevOps Day Raleigh, or wrapping it up and doing some travel. So today I will just get right to our guest. Our guest is joining us from DevOps Day Raleigh, Mr. Andi Grabner. Andi Grabner, how are you doing today? Nice to meet you. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, Brian, nice to meet you too. And I've heard about your podcast for many years, and I was always wanted to be a guest on the show. And now finally it happened. So for those people that don't know me, my name is Andi Grabner. Been working for a company called Dynatrace for 14 years, and I just happened to be I was very fortunate to be one of the speakers at DevOps Day Rally, which actually happened last week because at the time of the recording, we're talking about something in the past. So the conference is already over. Yeah. It was great, and I moved on from Raleigh, North Carolina to some other places, but I really I learned a lot in the last 2 weeks, visiting a lot of large enterprises and trying to figure out what they're doing around DevOps and SRE and just giving them a little bit of my insights on what I think will help them. And so we had a lot of discussions about SLOs. I'm not sure, Brian, if you've ever heard about this term, SLO?
No, not at all. Yeah. This is all new to me.
Yeah.
SLO, is that like you want the website to perform slow?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the counter movement to web performance optimization. It's like fast food, slow food. It's like fast websites, slow websites. Yeah.
Farm to table, developer's laptop to your browser without any testing or verification. We're just rapid production testing.
Exactly.
There's a movement. How about that?
Yeah. No, but I want to say, so maybe coming back to Devops Rally, because it was one of the first conferences with a live audience again. And that was actually pretty cool. It was organized by the team in Raleigh. They've been doing this for many years. Obviously, it was tough during the pandemic. But it was a single track conference. They also had breakouts with workshops, which was really nice. So people could then branch off after, in case they didn't want to hear some of the keynote speakers. I think some people branched off when I was speaking about Keptn, but that was okay. Yeah, it is what it is. But I was allowed to talk about Keptn, giving insights on what Keptn is and why we built it and who is using it, and got a lot of interesting feedback and a lot of interesting questions. But I think I may inspire the one or the other to actually look into Keptn, which is our CNCF project to deliver better, modern, data-driven orchestration to the SRE and DevOps community.
So before we dive into that, because I like tangents, I do have to, what's stuck in my mind with everything in Raleigh is back when I was a kid, not a baby goat, but a human child. And I should mention that because I've been watching Blade Runner 2049, which is a fantastic film, and Replicants and all that. But anyway, Raleigh Fingers was a pitcher. I think he was a pitcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And this is in the 80s. And his claim to fame was having a big handlebar mustache. Yeah. And it was just the craziest thing because we used to get these little sticker books for the baseball players and all that and stuff. And he was my favorite just because he looked the goofiest. And you keep on saying Raleigh, and every time I hear the word Raleigh, I can't help but think of him. But I should be thinking about Keptn instead because, we've talked a lot about Keptn in the past, right? And for people who've been listening thus far, they know what Keptn is. And this podcast is not strictly about Keptn. It's going to be about a lot of things concerning the conference. But you mentioned what Keptn does, and you gave a little brief mention of it. But for people who are joining who maybe don't know the history of Keptn, can we just start with a summary of the overall picture? What's Keptn for, and why is it awesome? Besides the fact that you work on it.
Yeah, and not only me, there's many people working on it. But I actually want to explain it because when I showed Keptn to some folks at DevOps Days before my talk, they said, "Well, this is just another if-then then this tool, right? If this is the case, then do this. So basically where Keptn originated was we internally 3-4 years ago tried to build and connect all the different tools we see internally and externally for delivery and auto remediation, whether it's a Jenkins, a JMeter, a Slack, different tools that basically help you in your job to get code pushed into production and also keep it in production. So we built together a lot of scripts that kind of connect them. And then we realized, man, this is really hard.
Yeah.
And especially if we are doing this, and it's hard because we need to maintain these scripts and these tool integrations. And if, let's say, all of a sudden the API of a certain tool that I'm using is changing, I need to update all of my scripts. So we said one of the things we need to solve, we need to make it easier to integrate tools or to kind of connect them. And then we said, what we do as humans, we always execute an action and then we look at our logs, our metrics, our traces. So we look at observability data and then make a decision what to next. So we said if we want to build something that helps modern DevOps engineers and SREs, site reliability engineers, then it should be something where we solve the data-driven aspect. So observability has to be a key component of the orchestration we're building here. Yep. And the second thing is we want to be able to connect it to any type of tool without having to think about how we connect these tools to the orchestration. So I don't want to build and maintain scripts that call tool A, tool B, tool C. And this is what we're doing now with Keptn. So Dynatrace was the main driver behind Keptn. It still is. But we donated Keptn to the CNCF, I think 2.5 years ago. So the CNCF is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Yep. We're just in the process of becoming an incubation, going into incubation status. So if you listen to this, we might already be there because the public commenting phase on the incubation status, reaching that status just started. So it's just a couple of days away that we actually become incubated. But really the reason why the open source community is so helpful for us, because we now have an audience and a community that helps us define an open standard on how these tools interact with each other. And Keptn is already baked in. It's an event-driven model, and we're currently standardizing the payload to, let's say, call a deployment tool, call a testing tool, call a notification tool, call an observability tool, right? All of these, there's so many testing tools and notification tools out there, but all of them have their own proprietary API. We're now trying to standardize this through the open source community. And I think that's a big benefit for everyone who has ever written automation orchestration scripts, because it's a pain to keep them up to date. And it's also a great help for everyone that wants to bake observability into their delivery pipeline and also using it for auto remediation, because that's the second big use case we cover with Keptn. Let's say you get an alert from your monitoring tool, something is broken, then you can have Keptn orchestrate the remediation, bringing the system back to a healthy state. And the healthy state is defined again by your monitoring tool. So you have like a goal-driven remediation. The goal is to keep the system back to a healthy state, and Keptn helps you to get there.
That's really awesome. So beyond the idea of integrating tools so they can all talk to each other in the pipeline and you can swap them out easily, if I caught what you said in there, you're also part of the project is also trying to standardize that API, so that all vendors will be using a similar API, so that for anybody who's integrating anything together, it'll be easier. They'll have a familiar API to work with. That's really, so it seems like a lot of vendors, or several vendors at least, are starting to get on board with that, which is really awesome. That what's it like to drive some kind of, be part of the team driving some of that change? We often, I think a lot of tool vendors, at least try to build integrations to work with it. But what Keptn is making, I guess, some headway on is getting all the different communities to come together on this API, which is bringing people together in the end.
Exactly.
Does that feel cool, or is it just like, this is just what we do in computing?
No, it feels cool. And I think what's great is that we have other projects that solve the same thing in other aspects. So think about OpenTelemetry. Right? OpenTelemetry defines a new standard across all observability platforms. And it just makes it easier for the vendors and also makes it easier for the users. And this is the same thing what we want to do here. We want to define what OpenTelemetry did for observability. We want to do the same thing for orchestration.
Right. And then I think going way back to the early days of Keptn, one of the other cool aspects of it that I thought was really admirable was, you talked about this certain setup that we had within Dynatrace in our tool sets. But anytime we talk to people, different teams have different tool sets. So one might be using Jenkins, one might be using some other pipeline tool, one might be using whatever different tools in there. And number one, maintaining that code is very, very difficult. So standardization is going to help there. Mm-hmm. But then also, once you have these, I think you called them uniforms in the past, mm-hmm. right? The idea would be if you want to swap out, maybe team A is using tool, X, but they want to swap out to tool Z. It's just going to make that swapping and changing a lot easier, so they don't have to go back and start from scratch and write everything that's quote unquote plug and play. If we go back to that old phrase that. I guess there was some good in plug and play.
Yeah, and in this case, it's plug and play. For us, it's event subscription. So the core of Keptn uses events, so it sends events, and then you can subscribe to a certain event for a certain project. And as you said, as an organization, I can define my DevOps process, my auto remediation process once with Keptn. We call it a sequence, and then the individual teams for their respective apps can then decide, okay, what type of tool do they subscribe to for the deployment, for the testing, for the notification, for observability. But the process never changes. It's just the subscription of the tool changes.
Yeah. So I imagine after your speech, did you get a standing ovation and did you have to sign any autographs afterward?
No, well, I did something else to motivate people, because we had like a box of Keptn T-shirts, and I was lining them up, and then people kind of rushed. And I think that was the only reason why I actually got them off their seats. But it was
the power of the T-shirt. It's amazing.
Exactly, it is. It's a beautiful T-shirt too, though, right? I mean, exactly. And now it was a great conference, and I got to say thank you also to our Dynatrace team who helped me in North Carolina, because the initial motivation to fly over to the States was DevOps Day Rally. But then I said, hey, if I'm already in the States, what can we do? So we did a lot of visits and workshops with customers in Charlotte, in Raleigh itself, and then this week, because it's already the next week after the conference, I've spent 4 days in Texas and did Houston and Dallas. It was just phenomenal. We spent typically between 2 and 4 hours with individual organizations and showing them kind of our best practices, our kind of what we think they should do in order to become better in their DevOps practices and their SRE practices. And that was great.
That's awesome. It's, I miss doing all that stuff. I haven't done that kind of stuff in years, but it's always fun getting out to the teams using all this stuff and helping them see things they hadn't seen before and opening up paths for them to move forward on. So that must have been exciting. With the conference, I imagine you had a chance to check out some other speakers and talks. Were there any topics or trends that you saw that really caught you, or just, not just topics that were like, hey, that's a really cool topic, but are you starting to see any new trends based on what you're seeing at this conference?
I think what I've seen there was one talk about observability, actually enterprise-wide observability for microservices. That was great, and it just shows that observability is a key topic that is very relevant for the DevOps community. The second, and I think we've invited her to also do a recording at a later stage on our podcast, was around chaos engineering. We had Anna Medina on chaos engineering a couple of months ago, but I think chaos engineering is yet another great discipline that helps DevOps engineers, SREs, to really ensure that the systems are resilient. But Mandy, she was talking, she's from PagerDuty. She was explaining basically, her talk was around planning the unplannable, because outages are, unplannable. There's a lot of, they happen, and then you have unplanned work. But obviously, if you are doing your homework, if you're doing chaos engineering upfront, and if you do game days, which means you can better practice, first of all, if something bad happens, but you can also detect any problems early on so that they never make it into production. And I'm really looking forward to having her on the podcast in a couple of weeks from now. But I think that the conference was one great thing, DevOps Days, but what I really liked was, again, the interactions with the accounts that we visited. And here, the big topic was SLOs, so service level objectives.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, there was one more thing. What was interesting for me, I'm not sure, Brian, if you know, but we recently published the State of SRE report from Dynatrace.
I haven't seen that yet.
You should check it out. You should check it out, because we did a survey across 450 SREs globally. We actually had, who we had? We had Stephen Townsend, from IAG. He's down in New Zealand. He's a good friend, Mark Tomlinson. He's been, and also Henrik. So he was actually also giving some feedback on that report in a quote. But what was interesting, SLO, service level objectives, is kind of the big thing in SRE, right? You want to define your objectives, and based on that, you decide, also focus your actions, right? And out of that report, we learned that 99% of people that responded to our question on whether they are good with defining SLOs, 99% said no, it's challenging, right, for multiple reasons. Too many metrics, too many sources to choose from, not a good definition of what a good SLO is. And so part of my tour the last 2 weeks was, with every organization I talked to, we went through a little workshop on, first of all, what are SLIs, what are SLOs, what's an error budget, why is it such an important thing to define? And then we walked through the exercise of picking a critical app and then starting to define a top-level business objective. So, for instance, the example that I brought was, if you have a new mobile app that you're building, what's your objective from a business side? Maybe it's adoption of that mobile app, so you can measure that. And if you say you want to have this mobile app adopted by 50% of your user base by the end of the year, then that's a good business objective. Then the question is, though, all right, what are leading indicators? Because we need to break it down into something that's more tangible. So leading indicators would be app rating, so rating on the App Store. What could hinder, what could result into a bad rating versus a good rating? Crashes. So we actually took an example of one existing customer where they told me they need to increase adoption. That was the top level goal. Then they told me right now they have a 2-star rating, which is why the adoption is not as going as fast as necessary. So we said, okay, the goal has to be to get to at least a 4-star rating, like all the competition. Then I asked them, what is the root cause of what are people complaining about? They said mobile crashes. So then we said, okay, we need to get mobile crashes down, because if we get mobile crashes down, we get the rating up and we get the adoption up. So we started defining a top-level business objective of adoption, and then we broke it down into more technical metrics like crash rate. And then we went further and said the first thing you do on the mobile app is you are probably authenticating yourself with the backend system. So we need to define good SLOs for the backend system. It needs to be available, it needs to respond fast, and it shouldn't have errors. And this was like a nice exercise that we ran through with all of our customers we visited. Then we showed them how you can do this in Dynatrace, how you can monitor those SLOs, and how you can also shift left. And this is where Keptn comes into play again, because the core technology of Keptn, remember, at the core, it can evaluate key metrics against objectives. So it can evaluate SLIs against SLOs. And so I really had great conversations. And I'm just very happy again to the Dynatrace teams who helped me get in front. I think we had 12 workshops in the last 2 weeks. Wow. And we had a lunch and learn. We had 2 dinner events or 3 dinner events. So we met a lot of organizations from all verticals, all different level of maturity. But everybody was clear on SLOs is what is important. And they have a challenge right now defining good SLOs, but they learned a little bit more about how to start with good SLOs, and that was good for me.
Yeah, I think that's always a challenge. Anytime I talk to anybody, any of our customers about SLOs, the question is, well, what should we do, right? And I think to your point, there hasn't been any strong guidance as of yet that I've seen in terms of here are the generic SLOs everyone should have. Right, and that's something that maybe you'll start coming out of this, because there's 2 factors to it, right? Factor 1 is that maybe there are a set of good practice SLOs for anything that can be defined, and I think it's going to take the community coming together and putting together some best practices and people like yourself helping them promote that, so that people can go in and start with a basic set of SLOs. But then the second level of it is exactly what you're doing, is teaching people to have those conversations to understand beyond the basics, what is our goal, what is our objective, and how do you have that conversation and turn that into more specific SLOs for that business requirement or that business need, and examples of those conversations, and or learning how to have those conversations and how to take those verbal requirements and then translate those into the proper metrics. That's going to be a little bit harder, I believe, but I think that's the thing that we have to help teach people how to do, how to have those conversations, how to translate that into the metrics, so that you can then get not just the quote unquote out of the box SLOs, but the more powerful ones specific to the goals you're trying to drive. So yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that 99% of people didn't think they were, doing it well. And when you think about it, it all lines up because it is, you would think it's an easy thing, right? Just need to monitor, right? But it's not. Yeah. That's what we've been doing for years. And that's why we're where we're at, because I remember going way back. I forget the guy's name from Cloud Foundry way back at one of the performs. What was his name? Bowtie.
Josh Long, maybe?
No. He was from Cloud Foundry, Pivotal.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. He mentioned the one about like way back on the early days of the internet, people used to have the counter on how many people visited the website. Like that was some sort of metric. And it's like metrics change as these things evolve. We all have to evolve and change what we're thinking. And that I think is always, it's a challenge in any aspect of this, this IT landscape, changing how you develop your code. Maybe, hey, I'm used to monolith. I got to get comfortable with this microservice architecture moving there. Same thing with monitoring. Monitoring is not just throw something on and capture data. It's knowing what to capture, what to look at, how to use it, how to make sure through chaos testing that you're capturing everything you need to be capturing. So it is a practice that I think often gets overlooked because people just like, I just throw something on, it's going to tell me what I need to know. Yeah. As monitoring gets more advanced and more capable, it needs people, you have to have people who know how to drive that. So it's interesting that it all bubbles up this way. Yeah,
and I want to add one more thing to this, why this is so important. I had 2 conversations this week, and they were saying, hey, we get a lot of alerts, and we had a lot of problems getting detected, and they have a challenge in knowing what is the one that they should basically tackle first. And that's the way the SLOs come in again, right? And we are now tying problems to SLOs in Dynatrace, meaning if you have 5 problems coming up, then focus on those that actually have a business impact, that is actually impacting the SLO, because the others might not be that important. Another conversation I had he showed me like all the work that he's doing. It was awesome, like performance optimization. Then I said, but why do you optimize? Do you have a business objective for this? Like, is business asking for better performance? Because right now you're losing people. No, we don't really know this, but we're just making things faster, and it's great to make things faster. But then the question is, might there be other goals that are more important to actually fulfill the business requirements? And then they all realize, there's definitely a clear gap between what they're doing on the technical side with the business objectives. And so I think that was just a big realization, the gap here.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that one, because we used to talk about that a lot when we started talking about DevOps and then Biz DevOps and all these different aspects of communications opening and performance team talking with the product team to understand what's important, not just monitoring. Of course, it's fantastic that anybody wants to go into the system and find ways to optimize, but optimizing blindly isn't necessarily going to drive better business or better revenue, or maybe even getting the recognition that you hope to get out of it, because if no one's seeing it or noticing it, they're not going to notice what you did. So having those conversations, breaking down those walls, breaking down those silos, going back to that thing, which, let's face it, we still see silos all over the place. I even see silos within different areas of Dynatrace, right? It's a hard thing to get past, but when you have those conversations, if you're looking at, I want to optimize, well, let me talk to the business team, let me talk to the product team about what their driving goals are, and then start aligning it to that. That's when you really start excelling. But you also just build those friendships and those bonds and the awareness, and it's a fantastic thing in the end.
Yeah, I had one more kind of interesting conversation. It was over dinner, and maybe I already had 2 or 3 too many beers and wines. But an analogy came up, because there was one of the people on the table. He was saying he really, he had the challenge of microservices and containers. He said microservice is a container. So he kind of thought that the two go hand in hand. And while they often go hand in hand, what he didn't understand, what we try to explain, is that microservice is the way you build the app, and container is just the way you decide to deliver the app. And the analogy that I brought up is, right, I can also deploy a monolithic application in a container. That's no difference. And the analogy that I brought up, you can go to Amazon or whatever retailer you like, and you buy 10 items because you want to buy, maybe we talked about kitchen, like buying kitchen equipment, table, chairs, and everything. And I said you can order 10 things, and then Amazon can decide to wait and put everything in one big monolithic thing, and then it ships it to you as a container. But the other thing is what you can do, you can break this offer or this order into individual pieces, and then maybe the tables can already be deployed to you via drones because they're smaller, but maybe Amazon still decides to ship everything in a container because that's the better way. So my analogy was that containers is the way you deliver things, and microservices is just the way you architect and break down a larger problem into smaller pieces. And there was just a confusion on that table that they thought containers equals microservices,
right.
And that's not true, right? And I just wanted to bring this up because I think we still need to educate people. And a lot of people are thrown into this new terminology now, and they all of a sudden have to deal with these topics in their organization, and therefore we need to educate them what this really means. Right?
Yeah, that's very important. And I'd be curious to see what these tables are that are small enough to be delivered by drone, but that's a different topic. Maybe those beers are still working. No, I think that's a really important one because we see that all the time, right? I was just having a conversation with somebody as well who did a lot of migration from people's data centers to Amazon, or just whatever cloud you want to put in there. But this conversation was specific to that. But what we're still seeing a lot of, and this person was mostly working with, was the literal lift and shift, not the cloud native transformation at the time. It was just take whatever I have, now I'm going to run it in containers, right? I mean, I've even seen people, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where they'll spin up Kubernetes and they'll run their monoliths in containers on pods. It's like, you can do that, but that helps, that helps define it, right? Because the fact that you can run a monolith in a container helps put that piece together. I do like your analogy. That's going to be a useful one because we're actually helping, trying to have some of these conversations with the sales team so that they have more of a basic understanding. And I'm gonna steal that analogy if you don't mind.
No, that's good. I had a second analogy too.
Yeah.
And again, this was after one more beer, I think, and the analogy was because we said, I don't know, some of the conversation of Harry Potter came up, so magicians. And I said, J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, could have decided she is waiting all these 7 years and write like the whole story in one big book. This would have been a monolithic approach. And then you could buy it as a big, big book and then just read it. Or, you break the big story into individual chapters like she did. And then from a delivery model, you can decide, do you buy paperback or do you buy it on your Kindle? That's the difference between monolith and microservices and the way you deliver it. It can be paperback or it can be electronically. Right. And
there you go. I had a whole one I was trying to work out through my head for the difference between bare metal, VM, container, and then Kubernetes, all based around a plot of land, a house, multi-dwelling units, apartments, and then a hotel. And, relying on, shared utilities, just all this stuff. So I haven't gotten it. I think these years are so much simpler because mine got really complicated. It was one of those shower thoughts I was having, and it got really, really complicated. I'm like, you know what, this is getting really ornate. But there's a lot there to it. But I think yours just go a lot clearer.
Yeah, but I like the hotel analogy because I assume what you're meaning with hotels, you have a lot of rooms and they need to be managed, and this is where Kubernetes comes in. Yep. But each room could have its own. Each room can have its own kitchen or bathroom or whatever it needs in it. It only has what it needs into it. If you want to do one of those longer stay hotels, you can have rooms with the kitchen in it with as well. So that's in terms of the VM versus the full OS or the bare metal is that you have only the pieces that you need running in that small section. But meanwhile, the hotel needs the entire infrastructure underneath, and you have people who manage running the hotel, and then you have a separate staff who are the developers who are managing the rooms and the guest services and all that. And I mean, it all fit in, but it just got really, really ornate. If you built a house, you would need another plot of land to build a second house, which is, bare metal, as opposed to maybe doing multi-dwelling units would be VMs, anyhow. Yeah, going back, I think I overthink things, Andy. So you're fantastic. You are the summarator, after all. So you've been traveling, and I know you just. I'm trying to think how was in general. I mean, I think people are going to start going back to conferences, right? Obviously, there's still some issues to mitigate, and there's still some risk for a lot of people, especially if you have health concerns and all that. But what was the general mood? Were people just like overexcited? Was it a Roman orgy of people being excited, or was there some caution? Like the general tone,
What are you seeing people coming back into this?
Yeah, I think the general tone was really positive that people see each other again. Yeah. That was one thing, and this was true for the conference as well as with the meetings we had with clients, because for most of them it was the first time after 2 years to actually go back to the office and see people again. The downside was some people were complaining about that traffic is so bad and they had to waste an hour to get from their other meeting that they did at home to their meeting in the office. Right? So there's always a give and take. From a conference perspective, what I have seen already in the past, but you could decide in the beginning based on the lanyard, there are different colors, and you could basically say you're okay with handshake, you're okay with, you can basically say what level of comfort do you have in terms of social distancing. I thought that was really good, so I could immediately spot people, those that I can hug and those that I rather, be careful with because they're uncomfortable with being too close. So I think that was good. But overall, it was great, right? And I'm sure we will, hopefully we'll keep the hybrid option. Yeah. Because it just opens up things to a larger audience. But there is an advantage for certain things of just being face-to-face with people. The socializing is different. The interactions are different.
And just the general networking too, right? Exactly. A lot of times with these conferences, it's a great place to network and help just meet people in different areas so that you can branch out. And hopefully people aren't looking at it like, I don't want my employee going there because they might get stolen somewhere else. As opposed to having the idea of like, hey, if my employee is learning and growing and finds a better opportunity, I would encourage them to move up instead of me holding on to them. It's always painful to lose somebody, but it's much more rewarding to see them flourish. But yeah, that's fantastic. It's great to hear. And we're going to have our own event by the time this airs. So I think we're going to have been in LA traveling's not done for you. Are you going to LA?
No, I'm flying home now. I've been here for 2 weeks and
you're beat.
I'm good. No, not beat, but I think I'm good now. I've done my job here, and I think there's others at SKO that cover the topics that I cover. So it's all good.
Oh, well, I was looking forward to hanging out with you, but I guess not. I imagine a million people would have been looking forward to hanging out with you. But all right, well, you go home and rest. You look a little beat. You sound a little beat. You sound exhausted.
Yeah, it's been two long weeks, and as you know, when you travel internationally, I still cover the time zones that I normally cover. So it's early days, and it is what it is, right? Late nights, yeah.
All right, awesome. Any wrap ups? Any takeaways you want to bring up?
No, maybe just don't forget that whatever we do as an industry, we should make sure we align it more to the business needs, because that will really help us to focus on what's really important. I know we can do 10,000 things, but let's focus on those that actually have an impact. That's my advice.
Yeah, and keep a lookout for Keptn on the CNCF, everybody. Hopefully that'll be out there soon.
Come to KubeCon if you can make it to Valencia. We are at KubeCon in Valencia, and on the SLO topic, both Rob, Henrik, and we have speaking slots at Open SLO, and also WTF is SRE. So what the fuck is SRE? I guess that's what the WTF stands for.
Yeah, no, what the fudge? No.
What the fudge? Yeah.
I did a speaking of SRE and DevOps and all that. I've in showing the difference between smart monitoring versus old school monitoring. I used to have a dashboard up that had maybe 100 metrics on it. It was just like a awful dashboard, and I called it the WTF Dashboard. And I would always introduce it to say, I call this the WTF Dashboard because when I look at it, I say, wow, that's fun. WTF, because I didn't want to say that in front of customers, obviously. So I would get them thinking I was going to say the awful thing and then switch it. But yeah, cool, awesome. So everybody in Valencia is in Spain, right? If I recall correctly. No, Valencia is in.
You got your geography right. I'm sure there's a Valencia in the US as well, but I'm talking about the one in Europe, in Spain.
Yeah. I like Spain. Anyhow, all right. Well, everybody, if you're comfortable getting back out to conferences, go for it. It sounds like it's very rewarding, very enriching, and get back to a little bit of the old way of living, but not too much of it, I guess. Well, let's leave the bad parts of the old ways of living, embrace a new paradigm of good ways of being with each other in public and treating people with respect. I love the fact that they're adding those what I'm comfortable with tags on the stuff. That's really awesome. Anyway, Andi, thank you so much. Now you're going to catch a flight, Mr. Jet Setter. Enjoy getting back home. Enjoy some rest. enjoy reuniting with Gabby, and hope to see you at some point soon. Yeah. Thanks for being a guest on the show, Andi. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Maybe we can have you back on.
Yeah, maybe. Well, let's let the audience judge, right?
Yeah. See how I did as a lead interviewer. This is why I don't lead these as much, people. Come on. All right. Thank you, Andi. We'll see everybody next time, and stay safe. And if you have any questions, comments, pure_DT at Twitter, or pure_performance at dynatrace.com. Love your feedback. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.